YouTube, how the duck you doing? Duck Films here. Today we're diving into Marvel Rivals, and more specifically we're breaking down all the tank characters, also known as vanguards, but to be honest we just call them tanks. Now whether you love shielding your team, diving into fights, or just annoying your opponents to death, there are 8 unique tanks currently in the game, so you might as well grab a snack and sit back and relax, because by the end of this video hopefully you know which tank suits your playstyle the best, and only a little over 1% who watch my video actually subscribe. Let's change that number into 100%, but without further ado, let's dive in. Now getting started with none other than Mr. America, otherwise known as Captain America. Steve Rogers brings the fight up close and personal. He's classified more as a brawler and bruiser, diving into fights and controlling the battlefield with his shield throws. Cap's primary attack is a melee combo, and after 2 hits he automatically throws his shield, which can ricochet off of enemies. Now in Season 1, Captain America got some much needed love and was given quite a few buffs, so he's definitely a very solid pick currently. One of his abilities, Liberty Rush, lets him charge forward with his shield raised, perfect for picking off squishy targets, plus he can deflect incoming projectiles, pretty insane. His ultimate is more of a supportive move, boosting his team's health and movement speed. He's great once you master him, but he's tricky to learn at first. Most often than not, he's usually played as an off tank, so he's not the center of attention, although he can absorb a lot of damage. Most of the time when you're playing Captain America, your whole priority is to dive into the enemy backline and just be a nuisance, trying to make the enemies as frustrated as possible when trying to deal with you, using your speed and really wiggling around the enemies. Let me know what you think. Do you think Captain America is a good fit for you? Moving directly into our next tank, we have none other than the space controller, Doctor Strange himself. Now, Doctor Strange is all about using his massive shield, that shield boasting a total of 800 HP, using his massive shield to block damage and strategically positioning himself with his cloak of levitation, which allows him to float into the air for 8 seconds. His passive that he has is rather unique. Every hit he lands builds up dark magic, but if you don't really sit in time, you'll suffer an anti-heal effect, which ultimately means you're not going to be able to receive HP. Now, one of his coolest and probably most important abilities is actually a portal. It's on a rather long cooldown, but you can place it almost anywhere, even off the map, for sneaky eliminations. Use it to get your team quickly to and from points, or you can even combine it with his ultimate ability, Eye of Agamotto, which stuns all enemies in a certain radius and increases damage taken. And from there, you essentially have the mitochondria of tanks, an essential hero with great utility. And typically he's played as the main tank of your team, always sitting in front of your teammate and protecting everyone in your backline and midline. Now if you're a person like myself and you love sustainability and crowd control, Groot's your guy. This big tree ant, this hunk of wood, whatever you want to call him, creates 2 different types of walls. The first wall being Thor and Lash Wall, which deals damage to nearby enemies. Now how to actually make the walls damage the enemies is by you actually hitting the enemy with your primary attack, or if your allies hit the enemy and they're close to that wall. Now not only that, he also has a secondary wall that is called the Ironwood Wall, which boosts your team's survivability. While you're by your wall and you start damaging enemies, or if your allies also start damaging the enemies, you start to gain HP while by this wall. So I recommend being rather strategic when you're actually placing the walls. Now his ultimate ability roots enemies in place, making it perfect for setting up plays or stop last second pushes on objective mats. For me personally, I really like to use Groot and Moon Knight together, as most of the time it's essentially a guaranteed team wipe. Now he also has Spore Bombs, which is his alternative attack that lets him deal consistent poke damage from afar. Now I do give you some caution of where you actually place your walls, because bad placement can really annoy your teammates, often leading them to hating you. Now let's talk about that big green guy, otherwise known as Hulk. You start every match as Bruce Banner, you're just a little man. Now don't be too worried, because every single time you load into a match or respawn, you're instantly given your ultimate that allows you to transform into Hulk. Now for whatever reason, if you don't want to turn into Hulk, you can still do some damage as Bruce Banner. He has a ranged attack, which is a gamma ray gun, but most of the time you want to Hulk out as soon as possible. Now Hulk is also seen kinda as a dive juggernaut. Now Hulk Sleep lets him dive into fights, and he can generate shields for himself and his team using indestructible guard. He can also banish someone, making them out of the fight for a few seconds. Then from there, once he charges up his ultimate, Hulk Smash, he becomes nearly unstoppable with over 1500 health and insane melee damage. And you also get to sling one enemy on the enemy team around, dealing a ton of damage. But I recommend don't be reckless, because bad Hulks can easily feed the enemy team. Now if you are looking to play Hulk, let me give you one recommendation. I recommend you to go to settings, go to keyboard and combat, make sure you have Hulk selected, scroll down to hero, make sure your charge jump is set to tap, not on hold. Having it on tap or toggle allows you to have really fluid movement with him. Now Magneto has definitely got to be one of the more offensive tanks in the game. His primary fire deals a solid amount of damage, and he can also deploy shields to protect his team and charge up his secondary attack, Mag Cannon, which deals massive damage, but if fully charged up will also knock back enemies. Now his primary shield can essentially absorb an infinite amount of damage, just more so like a time limit than anything. Now his ultimate ability, Meteor, is essentially a giant spirit bomb from Dragon Ball Z. It sucks at enemy projectiles, and the more projectiles and charge you have, the more damage it's going to be doing. It's insanely good for wiping out weakened enemies or supports. Following that, Magneto's high skill ceiling makes him super rewarding once you learn to manage his cooldowns. Now I found you can play him two ways. You can either have him as a main tank, or you can use him as an off tank. It just depends what playstyle you're really trying to achieve. Now Peni Parker is a very interesting character. She's more of a disruptor than anything else. Boasting both a mix of support and disruption utility, she can be very good at holding critical choke points. She can set up spider nests that heal allies and spawn drones to harass enemies that are pushing. Following that, her traps and mines are great for controlling choke points, with her web snare that she can immobilize enemies. She's perfect for players who like to control objectives and force opponents to come to them. While she's not necessarily as tanky as other tanks, her utility makes her invaluable in the right hands. Now something you should also note, her alternative attack, the web shot or whatever you want to call it, if it hits an enemy, it will stun them. But since it's counted as a projectile, you can also block incoming ultimates like Iron Man's ultimate and many more. Something that not a lot of players realize or really understand. Now Thor, or the God of Thunder, might seem underwhelming at first, but once you understand how his Thor Force actually works, this character, this god, is insane. Now by building up Thor Force, he can enter in an awakened state, gaining extra health and powerful attacks. Now unlike other traditional tanks, he doesn't have a shield. Instead, he gains shields through his abilities, meaning he needs to be played in a rather aggressive playstyle. Predominantly the playstyle of you running up to enemies and smacking them in the face with Mjolnir. Now his lightning rail ability helps him recharge the Thor Force quickly, and his ultimate, God of Thunder, deals massive AoE damage. But something you have to be aware of is that you have to play smart when using his ultimate, because when you ult, you're launched into the air and placed into a rather vulnerable state. So it's best to stick with your team and you'll dominate as this hero. Now last but certainly not least, we have Venom, the king of survivability and mobility. Now if there is one thing we can count on, it's Venom, the undisputed king of survivability and mobility in Marvel Rivals. Venom embodies the essence of badass. Now while the symbiote may be a bit self-centered, it grants him immense shields and bonus health, though unfortunately only for himself. Still, Venom is a nightmare to take down. The lower his health gets, the more shield he's going to gain, making him a massive distraction for the enemies. In a way, he does tank for his team, but I see him more as a damage spawn than anything else. Now combine that with insane mobility and aggressiveness through his signature Venom swing, and you've got a character who can disrupt enemy plans effortlessly. Opponents will be forced to stop what they're doing and focus entirely on you. Now one quick thing I highly encourage you to do is head over to settings, go to keyboard and combat, make sure you have Venom selected, scroll down to the heroes section, and make sure you have easy swing off. This gives you a ton of fluidity with his Venom swing, and this makes everything a whole lot easier. Now his ultimate, Feast of the Abyss, boosts his bonus health even further, making it perfect for finishing off weakened enemies or dealing solid AoE damage to set up kills for your team. Now while Venom isn't particularly great at one-on-one duels or dishing out huge bursts of damage, he brings a lot more to the table with his solid utility. His kit includes a slow to lock down fleeing enemies, and his primary weapon is reliable for finishing them off. To sum it up, Venom excels at swinging in, causing chaos, picking up a kill or two, and then retreating before things get too heated. He's also fantastic at pushing low health enemies desperately trying to escape or regroup with their supports. That's when you swing in, cause mayhem, and ruin their plans. Now that's a wrap on our tank breakdown for Marvel Rivals. Now whether you want to brawl like Captain America, dive like Hulk, or control the battlefield like Doctor Strange, there's a tank in Marvel Rivals just for everyone. Now if you found this video helpful in any way, shape, or form, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more Marvel Rivals content, and let me know in the comments which tank is your favorite. I hope you have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one.